So this is the first time in my life that I present a panel on a very serious topic with a background of techno music. Hello and welcome everyone to this SDG moment organized by Silatech, Education Above All, and the UN, campaigning to score another type of goals, not the ones happening in the matches, the SDG goals, as you all know about them, set by the UN since 2015 in the hope of achieving global sustainability by 2030. My name is Rawa Oje and I work at Al Jazeera, and allow me to start this conversation by telling you about a World Cup coverage that changed the way I practiced journalism. Raise your hand, please, if you remember in 2010, the famous story about child labor involved in the manufacturing of the balls for the FIFA World Cup. A lot of you must definitely remember that. Raise your hand as well if you remember what happened after that story broke. Usually this is where people don't follow the story anymore. The journalist won awards. She deserved them. She unveiled a very big problem. The FIFA decided to stop actually and to monitor the production line of footballs. That was also a big achievement. Us journalists, when we reach a stage in portraying something and revealing something and reaching a goal, we're very happy and we're very proud of it. But do you know what happened to those children? No one does. I remember in 2014, another journalist, I saw a documentary, and another journalist went to the same village where the first journalist went. And she wanted to make sure just it was in the purpose to check if the restrictions set by the FIFA are truly implemented. They were, luckily. But she met with the children who were working on manufacturing the balls 4 years earlier. They were still in child labor, but they were in a very harder job. They were working and transporting heavy construction bricks in the sun, in the heat. And one of those children, she was a girl, she was 12 years by the time the other story was done. And she limps now because one of the bricks fell on her foot. And unfortunately, that other story didn't get as much attention as the first story. This is, for me, the biggest problem. And those children, they were so pissed off at that journalist, the first journalist, because for them, she deprived them from a job that was in a flat with a fan, and now they have to work in the sun. They're doing harder jobs. I'm not advocating for child labor at all. On the contrary, what I learned from both stories is that, yes, it is our duty as journalists to spotlight what's wrong. It is our duty to hold people accountable, but it's also our duty to advocate for a holistic approach. The real story, the less selling story of the football manufacturing was not the ball itself, was not the FIFA itself. The true story, the bigger story that needed a holistic approach is child labor and poverty that pushes children out of school, that puts them in the labor market too young for those jobs. And in the end, it puts them in a loop of unemployment when they're older or in underpaid jobs. For me, this is what really should be our focus when we are journalists, to know that, yes, let's sacrifice a little bit on campaigning on the sexier story, and let's focus on what matters more, what improves the lives of people more. We should not be holding big corporates accountable is not enough. Holding governments accountable is also not enough, because what we see now for so many governments who are taking up loans to offer jobs for their youth in order to fight the high unemployment rates, what they are doing is that they are nurturing the cycle of non-producive job, in the sense giving jobs, bureaucratic jobs that don't produce, that don't generate finance, and then when we reach, like my country, Lebanon, a place where the currency is failing, those jobs, the value of those salary loses its value as well. So what we need to do, there are so many solutions. We are here today to talk about decent work and economic empowerment. From the experience of Silatech, we have evidence that one small micro business can generate up to from 1 to 2 jobs up to 11 jobs. So empowering youth into becoming self-employed and entrepreneurship might be a better approach than just the normal Band-Aid tape solutions we are used for. We are gathered today, as I said, to advocate, to promote for the SDG number 8 about decent work and economic growth, but we have to bear in mind that without working for these 17 SDGs together, we cannot achieve sustainability. If we don't offer these youth, these young people around the world, decent education, proper training, proper workloads, healthy environment of work, just and free of discrimination, we will not reach sustainability. Around these goals, our conversation starts today with the Director General of International Labour Organization, Mr. Gilbert Houngbo. I welcome you to the stage, please, and I ask you, please, to take the mic. So, as all of you know, or most of you know, the International Labour Organization is the United Nations agency working towards promoting jobs and enterprise, guaranteeing rights at work, extending social protection, and promoting social dialogue with gender as cross-cutting theme. And apparently you're very popular with the DJ, so he put the music a little bit up for you. for you. We have gathered here today, Mr. Houngbo, to collectively advocate for the SDG 8 with the focus on economic growth and decent work. The ILO itself launched several initiatives. One of them is the Global Accelerator for Jobs, the Social Protection for Just Transitions, and the Social Finance Program. Unfortunately, you started with your current job. You held office at a very hard time economically globally due to COVID-19 impact on the economy and jobs. So can you tell us how did the recent crisis affect where we are today and what impact has been seen on the labor market?
First of all, let me thank you so much for inviting ILO and my good self for this session. And congratulations for a very, very, very well organized World Cup with all the surprises that we also seeing, and particularly down to the SDG 8, which was adopted in 2015. And I was reflecting on it on my way here yesterday in the plane. When I look at the current crisis, I really want to congratulate the work we've done in 2015 because essentially it looks like we have foreseen those crises, including the multiple crises that we are facing. Yes, you mentioned COVID. We know also today we have we have to deal with the consequences of the war in Ukraine. But even before COVID, we already have very difficult situation. As I'm speaking, ILO, we released our monitor because we have been monitoring the global job market. And what we have noticed is that if at the beginning of the year, there was a beginning of recovery from COVID in terms of number of hours worked, then by the third quarter this year, we went backward by 1.5% of the total hour worked compared to last quarter 2019. And that translates to 40 million jobs lost. And what we have also noticed, if you look at the high-scale jobs, the recovery is continuing. So the loss is happening much more on the lower scale dimension. The third thing we are noticing is that that will not be surprising that the recovery is still much more sustained in the high economy, advanced economy, and then the number of hours we lost is happening in the low-income countries. The final point that I want to make on that is that recovery we are even talking about is happening more on the informal sector, the informal economy. So somehow, after 15 years of progress of formalizing the informal economy, we are going backward on that. And this is a serious concern. And that informal ramp up of the informal sector is affecting much more the women and the youth than the general population. So that calls for us to really redouble our effort. This is why the Global Accelerator that ILO, under the leadership of Secretary General Gutierrez, launched last year, become quite essential, where we want to work with all the multilateral and the bilateral and the civil society to make sure that we believe by redoubling our effort between now and 2030, we can be ambitious of creating 400 million jobs and also increasing the protection side, the social protection. But if there's one lesson that we learned from COVID is really the lack of minimum. We have half of the population of this world. Out of the 8 billion we reached the 8 billion a week ago. 4 billion have zero protection, which is very serious matter.
Can you explain to me why the informal economy is on the rise and on the recovery?
Exactly because of the impact of COVID. You see, a lot of small businesses, which are really the source of job creation, have really suffered. And not every country did have the opportunity to have a support program to those small businesses. And therefore, when people have gone de facto unemployed, coming backward again, we don't have sufficient structure in the countries to help those small businesses coming back on their feet.
I'll get back to you on how you're planning to create those 400 million jobs when we reach the positive side. Let's remain with the problem and the causes. We are witnessing higher and higher rates of unemployment, especially among the youth, even though we know that they are more educated than before. How can we explain this high unemployment rate?
Of course, the situation varies from one region to another and from one country to another. Just coming back from Berlin in Germany earlier this week, where we know, for example, that the unemployment rate within the youth population is lower than the global unemployment rate. And in their case, essentially based on history of vocational training and technical training program that they have had over decades. Then if you look at Africa, for example, where you have every year about 12, 13 million youngsters entering into the labor market, you do have the challenge of supply-demand and sometimes the lack of matching of what the economy really is in the need and where the training is happening. So you have different reasons based on the region. So what is crucial is really having much more support program orienting the youth toward, and particularly now toward the digital economy, as well as the service in general, where we know that the demand is higher.
And how is ILO responding to this? How are you participating in empowering those?
No, there are different ways that we are reacting. First of all, we do not act in a standalone. We work with our member states, as well as our social partners, the employers' organization, the workers' organization, first of all, at the policy level, that to ensure that we do have the policies that are much more conducive to create, and on one hand, to create this environment that will be much more keen to job creation, or in other countries, based on the request, the demand that we have from member states is really insisting on the skills, the skill development, and the vocational training. And one particular point is, and you mentioned it during the introduction, is the whole transition, the just transition, that we also help in country to ensure that you do have proper training, skill, reskilling or upskilling to ensure, for example, that workers in the coal sector can really be better prepared to move to the new domains.
As I mentioned in the introduction, from Silatech experience, the small, micro and small, medium enterprises are doing the best in terms of a model for providing jobs, providing other jobs than the person behind the idea. Silatech believes in creating and strengthening ecosystems that are based on youth entrepreneurship. From the ILO's expertise and experience, how critical is youth entrepreneurship and self-employment in global the economic development?
Oh, that is quite very clear. This is one of the way forward. Today, if we really want to address this challenge of jobs, we really need to encourage the youth in their own initiative. This is why we're talking about, when we talk about the labor market, that also have to include all we're doing. So it's not just a matter of the Ministry of Labor, it's also the economy, the finance, the trade, in a way to really create conditions for the youth to be able to unleash their potential. And this is really where we have to focus very, very much. Obviously, there are also, in some countries, particularly where you have the average age of the population is 25 or below, the problem is, of course, more acute than if you are in a population where the problem could be the other side, meaning the aging of the population. But for the youth, is really be able to create the condition and making it easier for them to set up new businesses, for example, access to financing or access to technical resources that they need, or the incubation techniques that ILO will finance in some of the countries. All of that are critical for us to continue focusing on the youth.
About a year ago, I remember a study by MIT forecasting that by 2050, 67% of the population will be out of jobs due to AI and all the advance in technology. Are we prepared for this?
I think we are much more. Whether we are prepared, this is a different question, and we discussed that a lot 3 years ago during what we call the Future of Work in 2019. When you think about it, it's not a bad thing I wouldn't say that we'll be out of job. Maybe the time spent in working might go down because of the AI and etc. Is a whole societal transformation that we have to go through. You have more and more countries, including Switzerland, where some companies right now are piloting a 4 days work and a 3 days weekend. And while increasing the productivity, the total factor productivity through a better use of IT and the technology. So it's also a positive side of it. The challenge for humankind will be what you do with the time that you've been free up. What do you do to keep, because the job, we have to keep in mind that labor is not a commodity. The decent job it's very necessary for human life, and beyond the idea of having a wage or having an income is also part of our way of living. So if you free up that time, is also what you're going to do with that time that is going to be critical for it. So I don't see that as necessarily as negative.
I don't see it as negative too, but when we talk about there's a problem really in matching between skills and the job market. Maybe I think now is the time to prepare the future matching of the future generation of youth to be matching the needs of a society or of a market who's based on AI, better advancement in technology, and things like that. You talked about the ambition of creating 400 million jobs. How do you plan to achieve that?
No, it's really an ambition, and I have to recognize it's very difficult. But when you think about it, that in itself will not necessarily help us to absorb all the unemployment we have in the world. So on one hand, it might look like very ambitious. On the other hand, it's really doable if all our 200, almost 200 countries in the world are really stepping up the effort. So obviously, what we are saying is that we need to work with not only the UN system, the multilateral, but also with the bilateral, with the financial institution at a different level. We are not saying that ILO by itself will make 400 million jobs created. It's really only when we all are working. And it's part of what you just presented at the beginning, is acting on the 17 goals. When you think about that, the SDG 8, from what I said, is really at the crossroad of all the other goals, the interrelation. So it's by acting, we cooperating with other colleagues in the development business, as well as our member states that should be and are in the driving seat.
When you say states need to step up, because we are here to advocate, so what would be your call to action to those states?
No, one of the things for me is really focusing about, again, looking at the existing policies for the youth entrepreneurship, particularly the access to financing, so that the youth can have their ambition being financed on that. That for me will be one thing. The second thing is really what we touched on, the skill, reskilling, retooling, upskilling, and linking that to the just transitions. Not only just transition from climate change perspective, but also just transition from toward digital economy and toward the service economy and the technology. So there are those two things that I would like to call for action.
How do you stay positive? There's a lot of that has been done, but there's always an economic crisis like 2008, COVID-19, a lot of problems happening along the way. So how do we remain positive?
First of all, you mentioned it. If you look since the end of the Second World War, the world has made progress. The world has made progress. The life expectancy has improved. Even look at the region here. If you take the state of Qatar in the 70s and you compare the state of Qatar today, is almost day and night. Though we talk about a lot of countries remaining under poverty line, the $190 a day, still the same countries' life expectation on average has improved. The girls' education, we still have a big gap to go, and we talk about education. Yet, if you compare that to 30 years ago, so we can look at different on target, you will see that we are improving. But what for me is quite important is two things. One is our ability to build resilience. It's for sure, we all know there will be other crises. We don't know what, we don't know when, but we know there will be other crises. So it's our ability to build resilience, which is one. The second thing, the more, when you look at it, on one hand, we do have reason to remain positive when you see this world has been able, within 2 years, to put together a new vaccine against COVID. So you can see the positive side. At the same time, quite frankly, we know also that the same COVID is causing the inequalities to be deepening. So my point is we need to conserve, to preserve the positive side of this world, at the same token, taking decisions and ensuring that we can protect the people, the citizens that are at the risk of being left behind against those shocks, and therefore developing the resilience and building much more protection, the social protection on one hand, or the social justice in general. We really need to have more social justice by ensuring that those that are at the risk of being left behind can really, by solidarity, we can really, all of us, be progressing in the right direction. So the more I see on the world being conscious of those two dimensions, resilience, social protection for better social justice in a fast-moving economy, that's what keeps me positive.
When you talked about now the problem during the COVID-19, how we managed in less than a year to get a vaccine, you reminded me of a panel I moderated for QFFD. They're with us here as well. And there was someone from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation talking and advocating for the universal salary. What's the take of ILO on the idea of universal salary, which is growing more and more in the West? We hear some candidates in elections advocating for universal salary for each citizen. But what about the idea of a global universal salary? Will it really help create jobs, or is it, on the contrary, going to create a stagnation economy?
I do believe that every household in the world, at the end of the month, should have access to a minimum income. Whether that income should come from salary track or from a social protection scheme. This is why I'm advocating also. So for me, it's a combination. The salary or the wage is troubling. You will agree with me that it's very troubling to spend 40, 50 hours a week, and then at the end of the month, still struggling to pay your electricity bill on that. So to ensure that the wages are adequate is one thing. Secondly, it should not necessarily be in a way that could be detrimental to the small business, particularly the small businesses, because we need to think about the cost of production. So the state also has a role to play. This is why I believe that combined with existing protection in the country should be able to give the assurance that every household has access to what I call a decency in life. So in a nutshell, when you think about it, as I said, on one hand, we say globally we are progressing, economically speaking. Globally, we are making progress, not as much as we would have hoped, but we are making progress on the climate change dimension. Of course, we know that we could have done better in Sharm el-Sheikh. But what is lagging, the piece that is lacking is the S like social on that. So the world needs to preserve the three dimensions, economic, environmental, and social, at par. And for that, we need to break some codes. We really need to break some codes in our world business model and to ensure that we define some kind of a new social contract. Yeah. And in the context of that, a new social contract, that's what we can deal with. I'm not so sure that I will talk about universal salary, if salary is a reward of the job done, but I will talk about a global income that gives decency of life.
Last question. I promise you that. What would be your advice for people, advocates, and NGOs and activists who are working towards achieving the SDG goals? What is your advice for them to remain hopeful?
First of all, never give up the fight. I think we really need to continue pressing. The challenge that we have always comparing to back home. I'm from Togo, and one of the traditional dance we have, you move 3 steps forward and 1 step backward. 3 steps forward, 1 step backward. And development is what it is. Sometimes we see setbacks, we can get discouraged. But no, you need to think about that. Okay, yesterday you have made progress, and tomorrow you will also make progress. So never give up.
Thank you very much for this hopeful message. Thank you very much, Mr. Gilbert Houngbo, Director General of ILO. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
And now we continue the conversation with a youth advocate, because now we heard from the patrons of the older generation. Now we need the youth advocate. We have with us Arij Al-Masri. Arij is a Syrian who's been very, very vocal advocate for youth, particularly refugees, IDPs, and other marginalized youth groups. We all know how the COVID-19 pandemic has crippled the global community and disrupted lives. The situation is further exacerbated for the youth segments that you advocate for, and being affected the most by loss of employment that is already scarce for them. With your direct engagement with youth, what are the biggest drivers of change for youth, for young people to support them in fulfilling their potential in the labor market?
Okay, hello everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you here all. Rawha, if we can start explaining the challenges that these refugees, if we're focusing about refugee and IDPs, they encounter in employment sector. And we then come back to the drivers of change. So basically, young people, they are facing a lot of challenges these days after the COVID-19 pandemic. And if we want, on different levels, and if we want to focus in the employment sector, and if we want to focus and to highlight on refugee and IDPs challenges to employment, there are too many challenges. Let's start with the first one is the internally displaced people, especially who lives in conflict zones and fragile communities. They are always under the threat of being displaced many times. And this is put a pressure on them to be able to have a stable job, for at least 1 year. And here I want to highlight a story, a woman from our children village camp in northwest Syria. She's a woman of 2 children. She's skilled in wool clothing, and she wanted to open her own project. But finally, she gave up because she has been displaced more than 4 times a year. So this is not only put a pressure on internally displaced people themselves, but also on the stakeholders and organizations who go there to implement their projects, but they know that their programs won't be sustainable and it might last for 1 year. And the other one, if we focus about refugee, many refugees, they have a challenge of the poor countries' policies that they don't give them the legal status to be in the country. So many of these refugees aren't able to work in the legal market. So this pushed them toward working illegally in the informal market. And this can lead to a very negative impacts. Like we can see here an increase, for example, in the violence and the crimes between the host community and the refugee community. And I believe that we have seen very clearly in Lebanon between Syrian refugee and the host community. And also, we will very likely to see an increase in unwanted marriages. We will see an increase in unwanted pregnancies, and also we'll see an increase in the rate of young people are joining the extremist groups. So we don't want to tackle with these problems, right? We already have a problem of employment, so we don't want to tackle with these problems as well. And also the other one, even if the refugee were able to have a legal status in the country, many refugees, and if I can mention the Syrian refugee, they were in countries where they do have a poor infrastructure. So the country itself cannot afford job opportunities for their locals, for their young people. So here, refugee put more pressure on the country, the host country, and also it has a very negative effect. And I want to mention here a very, to highlight a challenge that not well recognized between organizations and stakeholders. And I have personally experienced this, that if you are a refugee or if you are a migrant that you lived for years in war, and finally you had the chance to get out of the country and to go to a place where there are job opportunities, you feel that you are left behind, right? You don't have the same skills that you're, like the other young people, they do have same age. You don't have the same experience. You feel like you are pressured mentally, emotionally, physically to keep up with the track. And this is really big challenge that is not recognized. And one of these other challenges that these people who live the war and refugee, they are suffering from stigmatization, especially if you're coming from a country where the violence was there. So you will suffer with this, you will have less job opportunities because you are stigmatized. And also, I think one of the challenges universal is that the gender gap, and I believe not only refugee and internally displaced young people, they suffer from this, it's worldwide. And despite all the initiatives and all the work that has been done to empower women, to achieve justice between men and women and job opportunities, we still, like women, they still feel they are left behind. And here I want to mention a report has been published by ILO that it says in 2022, men were able to find or to be employed by 1.5 times more than women. So I think we still have this challenge we need to tackle.
But many women are also in the informal economies, and I think also the main problem of these informal economies and illegal jobs is that abuse is not reported and sometimes is bared by those people because they cannot even afford to leave for a better job. When you talked also about the fact that in the refugee camps there's a big issue of the skills not being recognized, and sometimes the bachelor degrees. I met with nurses and doctors who were working for 7 years in the field hospitals in Syria, which means it's an extensive experience in ER, and when they leave Syria, just because they couldn't get, even when they get their bachelor degree out, it's not recognized by other countries. So there's a whole loop of making life hard for refugees and having to start from zero. But there are also a lot of stakeholders who want to empower these youth, but they're facing obstacles to do it. What are those obstacles?
I think I mentioned many of these obstacles because, like, as I mentioned, the poor policies of the countries, it might put a challenge on the stakeholders, and like the internally displaced people, this displacement itself put a pressure on these stakeholders. So all of the challenges that young people, IDPs and refugee, they find a challenge, it's also a challenge to stakeholders and organizations.
And sometimes in some of those countries, as I understood, one of the main obstacles are government restrictions, wanting sometimes to pay certain fees to the development fund for certain countries to be able to operate and help, which is causing a lot of issues when those regimes are not really recognized globally. How can stakeholders enhance collaborations?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so Roa, let me start here from the very, very basic problem that we have in the humanitarian field, in my opinion at least. Until today, we're still prioritizing urgent humanitarian assistance over development. And here I want to give an example about Northwest Syria. For those who doesn't know Northwest Syria, it's a place that had been marginalized before 2011, and after 2011, the infrastructure for the basic services has deteriorated. So according to OCHA, this place has 4.4 million population. 2.8 of them are internally displaced people. So can you imagine like the pressure on the infrastructure? And also, the problem is not only here. The problem is that 4.1 of them are in need still to humanitarian assistance, which is delivered by the only opening crossing border Bab al Hawa, which is always under the threat of being closed. And we yearly have negotiations to reopen this border. So can you imagine if this border is closed, 4.1 million of people, they are under the threat of hunger. So if we look back, it has been 10 years plus now, we're giving these people humanitarian assistance. And personally, I haven't seen any improvement in the infrastructure. And I had done a paperwork in my master's degree about the health infrastructure in northwest Syria. And after all of these years, the infrastructure hasn't get any better. And this is a very big problem, you know? And also, if I want to go back to your question that, like, how these collaborations or how to enhance these collaborations between stakeholders, I believe that, first of all, it's really important to have these collaborations between stakeholders, not only on a national level, but also on international level. And also, what's really important for them to enhance their collaborations is to use all the funds, to use all the resources, not only money, not only finance, but also human resources, and collaborate together. First of all, if you want to focus on the employment sector, that to create job opportunities to young people, then to empower them with the skills, with the resources, to give them the space to be entrepreneurs. And also what I found really beneficial for them is to start to invest more in micro, small, medium enterprises, because I believe this one can tackle all of the problem of this displacement. Because no matter the situation that the IDPs and the refugees are in, whenever they are forced to leave, they can take their businesses with them and start all over again in the next place. And here I want to highlight a study also I did in my master's degree. It says how refugees can be positive contributors to the host community economy. And the study shows that Syrian refugee entrepreneurs added around 1.96% to the total Turkish economy. So actually, we need to invest more in these capacities, right? Mm-hmm. And I want to also, recently I've worked in a project between Education Above All, Silatech, and OHCHR, and I believe this collaboration is very important to link the humanitarian with development. We really need this. And if we are aspired to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals in 2030, we need to start acting now.
To end on a positive note, since you started working 10 years ago on advocating for youth empowerment, what are the positive changes you saw so far?
If I want to start from the very basic change that I have seen during these years is that young people's voices are more heard. They are more engaged with the stakeholders, even if it's not as supposed as it be. But that's good. We took the first step. We're still working forward. And also I have seen that young people, they are nowadays more aware of their potential to lead the change. They are more aware of the importance to support each other, to take each other's back. So if you can see, now we have many of youth-led initiatives, especially in the employment sectors. It helps and empower young people to have the skills and the resources to enter the labor market. And also, what I have seen is now it's becoming very popular to have these free online digital platforms, which can have the access to each house, can have the access to each refugee camp, and that's really important. So these people, they can have access to skills, and they have the same opportunity that I have here in Qatar. And here, I think I want to conclude by saying this. As a young people, and we don't only need to be given the platform to talk about the challenges. We need to be engaged more in the decision making. And I believe that we have always been told that you are the future of this planet. But no, we're not the future. We are the present of this planet. So we need to be engaged now.
Thank you very much, Arish. Thank you very much, Arish, Al-Masri Youth Advocate. And please stay with us for Sila Talk. We will run a short video, and then we will have speakers from Silatech, from outside Silatech, who will tell us about their project, about campaigns that they're running, and it's going to be quick and fast and fun. So stay with us just after this video. So now we will start our Sila talk with Dr. Noura Bouhlaiqa. She will be speaking about the entrepreneurship and butterfly effect in relation to promoting inclusive and sustainable economic growth, employment, and decent work for all. Please come to the stage.
Hi everyone, good evening. It's such a pleasure and an honor to be here. In the next, let's say 10 minutes or so, I'll be speaking a little bit about just an example of how Qatari entrepreneurs kind of help towards creating jobs within the local and regional markets. So my name is Noura Bouhleiga, and I absolutely love marketing and PR and social media and press releases. I love looking at social media engagements and all of the things that maybe other people can find boring, I absolutely love. So around 6 years ago, I started a social media and marketing agency called Communication. And this kind of started, I used to work in an amazing organization. I used to have a very stable, carefree job in marketing. And there, we used to work with agencies. So whenever we want to start a campaign, we used to always reach out to agencies. And we had limitless resources. So we would reach out to the best agencies based in LA or London and ask them for campaigns. And they used to always provide. They would give us great campaigns. However, they were very westernized. I felt at some point that they were Google translated. And especially within marketing, you have to hit close to the heart for the campaign to be successful. So I started researching local marketing and PR agencies, and this is where I really found the gap in the market. I found that we did not have, or we had very few local PR agencies with the level that we were looking to into my organization. And this is where I made the most terrifying decision in my life to quit my job and start with an agency. And I know a lot of people don't really talk about it. They always talk about the good side, but it is extremely terrifying to do this jump from the stability of a job to starting something and being in charge, not just of yourself, but a group of people who you'll be leading. And this is where the magic happens. So fast forward 6 years, I've been blessed to work on a lot of amazing campaigns. We've worked on, one of my clients is the museum, the National Museum of Qatar. We were in charge of the opening. Hamad International Airport. We did the Best Airport in the World campaign. I don't know if you've seen the opening ceremony of the World Cup. We worked with Ghanem al-Miftah. He's the first disabled ambassador of the FIFA. These are all things that happen within the 6 years. But as amazing as all of those moments felt, one of the most amazing feelings is, I'll tell you here, to click this way, the butterfly effect. So the butterfly effect, I know it's a quantum theory that's being debated. Some people prove it, some people are proving against it. I am a true believer of the butterfly effect. So by doing this jump, by doing the most terrifying decision that I did in my life, and creating this agency, not only did I work on amazing campaigns, but I also helped create jobs, jobs that created further jobs. So in the past few days, I wanted to calculate the number of SMEs that I worked with in the past 6 years, and the number was 824 SMEs. Not only did the success of those SMEs create jobs for them, but it created further jobs for the community. And this is the essence of the butterfly effect. By taking one step, the effects of this step is endless. And this is where I want to encourage every single person with a passion, with a drive to take this step and go ahead and move forward and create more steps. Recently, just now, sorry, the clicker this way. We were talking about the effects that how the SDG 8 moved or was derailed when it came to COVID. I found this very interesting graph, about, you would see the drop in vacancies that have, I just want, because the most recent numbers were in the UK, so I'm just using the UK as an example. But I'm sure that this could be copied in most regions. So you would see there was a drop when it came to job vacancies. Most big companies had to let people go in the source of COVID. But then what happened was pure magic. Because people were let go, it encouraged a more entrepreneur environment, and people started creating their own businesses. And this created what I would like to refer to as the butterfly effect. And you can see how now there are more vacancies in the market than ever. So basically, this is what I'm here for, and thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you very much. I would like to welcome to the stage Hamad Al-Hajri, CEO of Sununu. He's an entrepreneur and technology savvy, and he will tell us about his professional experience and how he created, apparently he's a serial entrepreneur.
Thank you very much, Raw'a. My distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to be here. And I want to talk about my experience. As most of you from International Labour Organization, we want to go in details how entrepreneur can maximize jobs for this world. Sununu at the moment is the biggest technology company in Qatar with $500 million transactions per year. And we just closed Series B with valuation $150 million. We are looking to expand above the border of Qatar, inshallah. But what is the entrepreneur can add to this world? This is the main questions. Is the entrepreneur is a businessman who can solve only one problem? Or he should look to the ultimate problem? And here's the difference. So we have a problem. We have a base of customers who want to get their services to be delivered at their home steps. So the business model of Sununu deliver everything you need: food, pharmacy, grocery, in Q-commerce basis. By saying Q-commerce, it's 30-minute delivery. We don't look to only customer. This is the ultimate entrepreneurship and the ultimate problems. Number one, we look to the customer. How can I solve his problem? Then number two, I have the business owner. How can I help them to start their own businesses? Then I have the drivers. People mostly, they are jobless, they are at their home. How can I help them to gain the jobs? Then I have the students. Many students today, they are suffering to find a job after graduation. Why? Because in technology company, some technology company are selfish. They want to have experienced graduate. You cannot find that one. Then the last one is the environment. So this is the 5 pillars we were looking for. How can we solve it together? Me as entrepreneur and leader before being entrepreneur, my job is to take all these 5 problems above my shoulder and solve it together. So from the students, we create part-time jobs. We create programs where actually, and this is here I'm sharing our experience to everyone. We start employing them from the first and the second year. And when they graduate, they don't just get a job, they get promoted. I have a case, engineer who been promoted senior engineer in the day he graduate. So he get part-time jobs, he continue his study, he start actually pay for his expenses and teaching expenses. When he graduate, he already have a job. At the same time, it's not a lot of pressure on me because I don't pay him as much as full-time. So it's actually a common interest in both of us. So I have the drivers. So those drivers, mostly they have job issue in their home. What we do, we bring them, we teach them, everything, health, safety, driving, defensive driving, everything. And we're using the technology to connect all the 5 together. But we have a cases. What human need actually? Human need only one thing. He need a job. He need opportunity. The moment you give him a job is the moment we hear he can find, a good future. I have as example, one guy, his name is Aziz. He's from Bangladesh and he don't have a job. He came here and we're using our technology because the driver can do 3 to 4 delivery per day. But with using our technology, it's 25, 26. That means he get too much money. So that is the power of the technology. Now, make a guess what his job inside Sununu. He is financial specialist. He managed to fund himself and continue his study. Then he got promoted 3 times in the company. And now he is financial specialist. His jobs is to check the fraud, all this financial systems. And also we have, when it comes to student, I have a guy, his name Yusuf Bek. Yusuf Bek is from Uzbekistan. From, a family that doesn't have much wealth. He came here, he went to Carnegie Mellon, and he have issue even to live, because he only have university and he need a job. He joined us as part-time. Make a guess, where is he now? Now he will graduate next June. He already been the first students from Carnegie Mellon to be selected by Silicon Valley Innovation Program. He already started his own startups in fintech, and he already closed his seat. But why? Because he had the opportunity, and when you have the opportunity, you get the experience that you need. When it's come to environment, we already implement sustainable bags because we have 6,000 businesses under us. Easy to implement any environmental objectives. We are the first company in the GCC to start electrical car delivery. So it's our job also to solve environmental challenge and problems. So I don't want to take longer, especially with this nice songs outside, but I believe in ultimate entrepreneurship. I believe in entrepreneurs that can come and solve multiple problems, not one problems only. And what is the outcome of this one? I can summarize this in a few outcomes. We created 7,000 jobs for drivers and people who can help us, especially with deliveries. We created 4,000 direct jobs, especially in homemade businesses, and total of 16,000 indirect jobs. In very small country like Qatar, this is small startups. Think about big startups, what can they do? We help the environmental with multiple solutions. We have 4 entrepreneur graduates from us. We have one Libyan guy, he only have high school. He created the first cloud kitchen business in Qatar by just working for us and see in his eyes, what does entrepreneurship mean? What does startup mean? So I believe startups is a university, it's a small university for the students to be a success entrepreneurs in the future. I just want to share, the common goals or common experience I faced with our friends and distinguished guests from International Labour Organization. I hope you use this experience for further development. Thank you for all what you're doing to the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will have Ms. Mariam Farid, but before you take the floor, the ambassador, Your Excellencies, the ambassadors are invited outside for a tour. And we'll continue the conversation with Silatech with Mariam Farid, who is Qatari track and field star, one of the Qatar's most promising young female athletes with high ambitions of achieving success. Please come and tell us more about yourself and your goals.
Hello. Hello, everyone. Hope you're doing well and enjoying the vibes of the World Cup, because I'm super excited. How does it work? Wait. How does it work?
They're putting on the presentation from
I got it.
the technical part.
Sorry. Okay, perfect. Hello, everyone. This is Mariam Farid. I'm a track and field professional athlete in the national team of Qatar. My specialty is 400 hurdles. I'm as well the official spokesperson of the Qatar Women Olympic Committee in the country. I have professionally started in 2013 my professional career. Before that, I was very active. I was that young girl who loved to run, play football with people that I don't even know in school. I always had the energy that I want to play sports, and I always had the energy to take my energy out in sports as well. Throughout my 10 years of professional career, most growing up and improving in my career, but I also had the breaking barriers and stereotype of women in the region, not just as a woman, as a hijabi woman, as an Arab woman, as a woman in the region as well, as a covered hijabi athlete. So it was always all over the years breaking the stereotypes and breaking people's perception of who we are as women in the country, from Qatar, from the region, and from the Middle East. I've competed in, alhamdulillah, in a couple of amazing competitions, such as the Asian Games in Jakarta. I was one of the first to compete in 2 different world championships. I've done the World Championship Youth, and then I've done as well the track and field World Championship happening here in Qatar. I have local medals, records as well as international competing, and as well having medals such as West Asia Gulf Games, Gulf competition. So it all started at the age of 16 years old when I was chosen to be the ambassador for the World Championship bidding. I was at the age of 16. I look different now. It was in front of the International Olympic Committee, like Sebastian Coe and big names of sports in the whole world. Speaking as a young, upcoming, inspiring girl who wants to inspire and empower women, and to actually compete for the first time in the Middle East, and having it in the first time in the Middle East in Qatar in 2019. So I was the youngest from all the bidding teams. We had the US, we had Spain, we had big competitors. And we won on that day in 2014 to host for the first time the World Championship in 2019 here in Qatar. And I'm super proud and super, to take part of this was something big. And since that day, I always hold my promise to be there, compete in the World Championship, but at the same time to actually not stop on breaking people's perception of who we are and go and on and on. I was as well growing up with social media and with all of that. I always, by nature, I was always trying to give each part of my life, how do I say, a point. So as a young girl, take my time to be social and be nice and looking good and being keshka in a way. But at the same time, there was always perception of if you're an athlete, you would either look too manly or you're not gonna look good. So I always had this perception of, no, I can still look good, I can still put makeup on, but wear a sports outfit. So throughout the years on social media, growing with the audience, on reaching to different audience, either a sports athlete, either a young girl, or as well just a person who likes fashion. So it's a mix of all. So the vision and mission was mostly inspire, motivate, and break down barriers. This picture is very close to my heart. It was when I competed here in Qatar in the World Championship, and it's very touching. I played in front of my people, my friends, my family. It was an exceptional moment because it was also something special having it for the first time in the country. There's no sound, right? It's okay. So I've done a lot of community engagement just to inspire younger generation to be there, speak with younger generation, people from my generation, having women talk, communicating with different women from different fields. And all of these help a lot on breaking the stereotypes and breaking the barriers of people's perception of women in the region and women in sports as well. So this is one of my videos at the World Championship.
Can they play? Yeah.
Okay, it's okay.
They're trying to get us that video.
So there's no sound, but the sound is more fun. It's okay. It's okay. Okay. As well as another breaking down the barriers and stereotype that I can still be a professional athlete but have my full education on. I'm a graduate from Northwestern University, from Qatar Foundation, and I'm an alumni of 2021, and I see a couple of Northwestern students here. But it was as well something that breaking the stereotype of, oh, if you're an athlete or a professional football player, you can't continue your education, or you're not continuing your education. So again, this part was something important for me, as I come from a family they're all doctors, and I was the only one who just did something else, doing a communication major. But as well, it was a way of growing up and breaking the stereotypes was something I did not realize until I started growing up, and people saying, "Oh, you have a degree, but you're an athlete. How did you do that?" So these questions start being raised. The more I grow and the more I interact more with the public, and it's part of my journey. I'm proud of it, and alhamdulillah, I got grateful for it. And these are a couple of pictures, me. And this is what I do. I jump hurdles. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mariam, and sorry for not being able to play your video. You might not be a doctor, but you're still very kashka. I'm sure that you're the most kashka of the entire family. If you remember, the dinosaurs were in the UNGA recently. Don't Choose Extinction is a UNDP creative global campaign that went viral during the UN General Assembly in September. We have with us the head of the office in Qatar of UNDP, Mr. Biplav Chaudhry. He will shed light on this campaign. Please. Can I have the mic?
Play the film.
I will give you the mic here. No, you turn it off? Okay. Thank you very much.
So I'll maybe introduce for a minute, and then you'll play the film, sir.
Yeah. We will play
Okay.
the video themselves.
Okay.
Can you please play the video for Don't Choose Extension?
You okay? You need a minute? Cool. Okay. Listen up, people. I know a thing or two about extinction. And let me tell you, and you'd kind of think this would be obvious, going extinct is a bad thing. And driving yourselves extinct? In 70 million years, that's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. At least we had an asteroid. What's your excuse? You're headed for a climate disaster, and yet every year governments spend hundreds of billions of public funds on fossil fuel subsidies. Imagine if we had spent hundreds of billions per year subsidizing giant meteors. That's what you're doing right now. Think of all the other things you could do with that money. Around the world, people are living in poverty. Don't you think helping them would make more sense than, I don't know, paying for the demise of your entire species? Let me be real for a second. You've got a huge opportunity right now. As you rebuild your economies and bounce back from this pandemic, this is humanity's big chance. So here's my wild idea. Don't choose extinction. Save your species before it's too late. It's time for you humans to stop making excuses and start making changes. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Excellencies, colleagues and friends. There's not a lot to say after this very interesting video, but I won't bore you much, I promise you. But just a few things to say. First of all, a big thank you to Silatech, His Excellency Mr. Hassan Al Mullah, and Hani and others who facilitated the screening of the short film which UNDP produced and was launched, as was mentioned by Rawa, at the General Assembly. It seems to have struck a chord. Over 2 billion people have watched it, and countless mentions in almost 92 countries in media and so on. And the central message of this film is that while we are all trying to stop climate change, simultaneously we are also doing things which are exacerbating it. And why is this linked to Silatech is something also which I'll talk about. I think we've heard very inspiring stories from a number of entrepreneurs, very inspiring stories about how the importance of employment and micro-enterprise in dealing with poverty, in getting a pathway for many of the poor countries to earn an income, support their families, attain sustainable development goals. We've heard these stories. And we've also heard from, in the beginning, by the Director General of ILO, how there is an uncertainty complex, not simply climate change, but also pandemic, also wars, also polarization, conflict, which are all sort of, added to climate change, is all sort of creating challenges for communities to have resilient livelihoods, to have incomes, to have employment. And so this is just one part of the story. So I'm not going to deal with the entire uncertainty complex, but we must remember there are many, many factors driving it, as Rawa was mentioning in the morning, and very hard trade-offs. So she mentioned the story about, I was particularly struck about children in the football factory and moving to even more rigorous forms of child labor. There are very hard trade-offs. So the question is, how do we address these very important challenges? And we need money for it. But if you look at what governments across the world spend on fossil fuel subsidies, it adds up to about $428 billion. So that's a lot of money. To just give you some perspective, the amount of funds which are required to address extreme poverty globally is 1/3 of it. So you're 3 times the fund which you require to address the poverty, precisely the type which Rawa you spoke about. And also the stories about Syrian refugees and so on. The kind of, if you add up everything, the total ask is 100 and some odd billion dollars, and you are spending 423 odd billion dollars every year subsidizing fossil fuels. So that's something which is a very stark. Secondly, another way to look at it is, when you look at what the ask is for the poor countries to work on climate change action, to mitigate climate change, and these numbers are floating around, it's just 4 times the amount of that. So essentially what we are saying as UNDP, and really along with many, many entities, all the UN family and scores of entities working on it all over the world is we have to stop subsidizing fossil fuel precisely because it is accelerating the rate of climate change. And that's the short and simple message which I wanted to leave with you. Silatech is working on doing excellent job across the world on youth employment, on micro enterprises. One important thing to remember is that if you look at the population across the world, which is living and working in climate sensitive sectors, this entire population, it's almost about half the world population, almost 3.6 to 4 billion people. They are people who are impacted every year by climate change. We have Pakistan as a recent example, Bangladesh as an example. Currently we have Horn of Africa where almost 36 odd million people are suffering the impact of climate change. And agricultural livelihoods, youth employment, youth enterprises, agro-based enterprise, the direct and indirect impact. So it's all linked and interconnected. So by taking some concrete action, we can do our bit and contribute to this, stopping the climate change from becoming an inevitability. That's the short message we will leave you with. Stop making excuses, start acting and be a champion, spread the word. Thank you so much for your patient listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I'll just add, don't forget to keep scoring for the goals during the FIFA. Enjoy the match just shortly after. Thank you very much, everyone, for being here. And now is the time for the younger generation. Support them, empower them, be with them, and let's make some change. Thank you.